Today, we're going to be speaking with Mr. Robin Dunbar, the CEO of Grid Metals, which is a producer or going to be a producer of cesium, an element I think that most of our viewers are not familiar with, but what is very important, and in which Canada is really the world's lead producer. So, Robin, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this particular resource?
Sure, Jack. Thanks very much. The company, our Grid Metals, we've been explorer developer in southeast Manitoba now for a number of years, and we had identified and drilled off a lithium resource in southeast Manitoba, our Donner project, earlier in 2021-22. And as a result, we were looking in southeast Manitoba for other pegmatite systems. And the Falcon West property came to our attention, which is a little bit further afield than our kind of core properties. And we noticed in our sampling and historical assessment work and our first drilling that there was a considerable amount of cesium and included with the lithium. And we were, of course, aware that cesium is the element that occurs in the most evolved pegmatites. And once we got a certain amount of data, we realized we had the potential for an actual cesium deposit. So we started drilling that in earnest in 2024 and continued in 2025, and now we just finished another phase of drilling that we did over about 130 drill holes in an attempt to define an actual mineral resource. So we're just getting the last results from those holes, and more than likely we'll be proceeding with a mineral resource. So that's a bit of the history there.
It's my understanding that your actual deposits are close to the surface.
That's right. It's a very unique feature. Almost all the intercepts of the pegmatite, which we call the Lucy South pegmatite, are within about 30 meters vertical from surface, and some come quite close to surface. It's a flat lying pegmatite, so it's like a flat lying sheet of paper. That's very positive in terms of a potential extraction, and that it's just close to surface. So as a result, most of the holes we're drilling are very shallow holes, 50 meters or less in most cases.
I think from my own knowledge that Canada is the world's premier source of cesium, and in fact, most of the cesium comes from a system very nearby your deposit.
That's right. Well, southeast Manitoba actually has as you say, it's the host of the Burnick Lake pegmatite, sometimes known as the Tango pegmatite, which is currently owned by a Canadian subsidiary of Sinomine. It's quite a large layered pegmatite, extremely evolved. It has zones of high-grade lithium, high-grade tantalum, and cesium. And so it's we're the next greenstone belt south of that greenstone belt that hosts the Tanko mine. So it's no coincidence in my mind that you have another extremely fractionated pegmatite that we found, like Lucy South. And one of the things that we'll be turning our mind to after we finished our resource is are there more occurrences and larger occurrences or in the belt, in the Falcon West belt that we're in. So it's a really interesting area, southeast Manitoba, and there's actually one of the two cesium plants that process cesium in the world, which is at the Tanko site as well. So a real cesium hub in southeast Manitoba.
I, I'm very happy for North America that you've come across this deposit because one of my colleagues on InvestorNews went ballistic when Sinomines bought the Tanko property because nobody was paying attention to the fact that this was the world's source of cesium. And the Chinese actually came in and said, hey, you fellows aren't interested, we'll take it over. And people thought, gee, why are they interested in cesium? Perhaps they're using it for New Year's celebrations. But the Chinese were very far-sighted because cesium was getting more and more important in electronics and in specialties. And as a pedestrian use, most of the world's cesium goes into oil and gas drilling because of the very special properties of the cesium compound called cesium formate. And I believe that the USGS estimates there's about 10,000 tons of this material in use, and it's actually rented. The cesium formate producers supply it to oil and gas drillers, and then when they're done with it, they return it for recycling. That's how rare cesium is and how important it is. My own particular background, before you were born, I believe, I worked in what's called photo emission technology, and we used cesium to produce the active materials in photocathodes, which back in those days was used for scientific research, and today is used by the militaries of the world to equip their soldiers with night vision devices, and it quite frankly is not replaceable. So it is in fact very important. And I don't think that you would want to reveal this, but my guess would be that you're in contact with the defense units of both Canada and the United States at this point.
Yeah, I mean we're certainly looking to outreach to all potential buyers of the product, and we've seen a number of different inquiries, and for us, moving from an exploration stage company to a company that is more in development with once we've completed our resource, we'll have a tangible number. We think we'll have the world's second largest published cesium resource, and something that has the potential to come to market rather quickly in the realm of mining properties. So we think that's a very dynamic market with not a lot of supply right now, almost none. So very interesting dynamic. Truly, when you talk about critical and rare, I think that defines the current state of the cesium market.
You've got an unusually lucky situation. When we were talking about your near surface deposit, you have an exceptionally rare but important material. That's the focus of this, and yet it's easily accessible. I just want to remind our viewers that the world production of the element rhodium, which is much rarer than cesium, is 30 tons a year, and most of it comes from about 2 miles down in South Africa. So if it weren't a byproduct or a co-product of other things, there would be no production of it. In your case, it's relatively easy to get at an unusually rich mineral. Your principal mineral frequently reports at 10 to 20, even more percent of cesium. So the fact is, you're probably going to be the only non-Chinese producer. And of course, the Chinese producers producing in Manitoba.
Yeah.
Okay, but can you tell us a little about the uses of cesium as you see them and for what you're going to produce?
Sure. Well, for that, I might turn it over to my colleague, Brandon Smith.
Good.
Brandon is our corporate development officer who was a former mining analyst. And, just as background, one of the things that we that we've done is we've tried to do a lot of research on the the cesium uses and supply and demand and dynamics of the market, and so Brandon's been kind of spearheading that initiative, and also while I'm at it, introduce Austin. And the reason that we brought Austin aboard is that Austin is used to work for Albemarle, and Albemarle has a cesium division. So he has one of the very few people around that has real world experience in the cesium industry. And Austin's based in the U.S. and has a lot of contacts and experience in the U.S. market. So yeah, we've relied on Austin on his expertise as well. So having said that, I think it's an evolving market, and it's kind of hidden, but also quite dynamic in its own way. So with that, I might ask Brandon to provide a bit of an overview.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. And then I'll maybe throw it to Austin as well, because he did, lead the second largest producer of cesium chemicals in their cesium business. So, but yeah, from what we can see, Jack, you mentioned 10,000 tons of cesium formate per USGS, and kind of 500 tons of that are depleted per year that they don't, go back to effectively cyanamine. And the other big uses are there's uses in aerospace, there's military applications with atomic clocks. Cesium's the element of choice in atomic clocks, and you can use them in high missile systems, GPS, electronics, and kind of medical imaging equipment. And the one thing I would like to add for viewers on an overview of the market, that USGS report that kind of summarizes cesium, it is in very short supply. So it mentions there's a few years of stockpiles at current chemical producers. So, the world, as you've mentioned, desperately needs cesium feedstock, which is you want it in the mineral pollucite, and that is what we have at Vulcan West. So, that's what we're focused on doing. And there are two main players. Cyanamine, which owns the Tanko mine, has 85% of the market. And then Albemarle is, plus or minus the remainder of it. So I guess with that and Albemarle, I'll throw it to Austin to dive into kind of some of the uses and what he saw on selling cesium chemicals to end users.
Sure. It's Jack, it's one of those chemicals and elements that has some really cool applications. An alkaline earth metal, like a number of the other materials that are on that column, it goes into many of the things that Brandon and you've mentioned. Well drilling in that follows the oil and gas industry. We'll see kind of how that develops with some of the activities globally today. Brandon mentioned medical and X-ray spectroscopy, infrared flares. One that I didn't hear mentioned was catalysis. So cesium catalysts are used in the production of sulfuric acid and polyethylene. So it truly is kind of this chemical that has really beneficial properties in a number of chemical processes, and the likes of BASF, and other companies I won't mention, but a lot of those who do these very diverse chemical processes look to cesium as a chemical that helps their business. I had the good fortune of being involved in the cesium business for about 6 years, and there's kind of the two dynamics. I think y'all touched on it in the well drilling and the rental concept that happens in formate, and then the consumption and application for all of the specialty applications, and really the process. Brandon mentioned the mineral pollucite. That's digested and converted into cesium carbonate, which is kind of a building block for a lot of other salts, cesium iodide, cesium nitrate, cesium formate, which then become the uses or the chemicals that are used and bring that cesium element to the table and really provide some of those cool benefits. Market has been growing, continues to grow. I think everyone who's spoken has referenced the fact of it's a very small market, very limited supply, And with the growth in applications that companies are finding the benefits from, I only expect cesium to grow further in the coming years.
I think that people are overlooking one important thing. When we talk about oil and petroleum product production, the largest producer of these products in the world is the United States. And the current administration said, drill, baby, drill. And the first thing I thought of when I heard that, I wonder where they're going to get enough cesium formate, because we actually, the United States outproduces Saudi Arabia and Russia put together on a daily basis. So you certainly have a building demand for this product. My particular background was in electronics. And because I worked as a young man in electro-optics, and of course, every photocathode we made was in those days cesium antimonide. And the problem was the cesium. We had to produce it, and cesium is an extremely, as you know, reactive metal, the most electropositive metal that's available. And so you can't just put a jar of it on the shelf and scoop it out with a spoon. So it has to be specially handled. And I well remember, because I was in charge of that as a junior, producing cesium on demand to coat tubes, to coat antimony films. And at the time, there was no information about it. I mean, I was a chemical engineer. We had to make up as we went along. We didn't know it. We investigated the properties. That was 60 years ago. And today, cesium is much more important than it was in 1967, and yet fewer people know anything about it. And I think I was surprised a few years ago to find out that Canada was the world's principal source of the minerals containing cesium. And so, what else is were you originally looking for cesium in your company, or were you looking at lithium and other things, and you came across how did you find the cesium deposit?
Originally, we were looking for lithium.
Okay.
Manitoba has a system of assessment work in their geological database, which is posted online. We, as part of our business in Manitoba, know a lot of the geologists and prospectors who hold some of these early stage properties, and this property came to our attention, and it took a considerable amount of time to acquire it from the various parties, but we thought that the one thing, the area is it's very accessible, so we're just off the Trans-Canada Highway, but it is an area that doesn't have a lot of rock exposure. So a lot of it is under some till cover. So there hasn't been a lot of exploration. In general, Manitoba went through a bit of an exploration boom for lithium in the 1950s. And then there was a long period where not a lot happened. And so, these properties sit there. Sometimes they have a claim over them, but not a lot happens. So when the opportunity came along, we acquired the property, and we still really didn't have a great idea what the potential for cesium was. But it was a couple of years ago, we thought, okay, well, this looks, some of the results we're seeing pollucite compared to, again, you do research compared to, other occurrences around the world. It looks extremely promising. And so, it wasn't until we had drilled quite a few holes that we got a sense, we can call this a cesium property. And that being, we think this will be a primary cesium deposit. There may be credits for lithium and maybe, perhaps tantalum. But the primary economic driver of this will be based on the cesium. So the whole process took a little while. And one of the reasons is cesium is extremely rare. There is, I think, only 6 deposits that have ever been, commercially, looked at. Only 3 have actually produced. They tend to be relatively small. Having said that, PMET, which is a Canadian exploration company, has found a large resource in northern Quebec with lithium and cesium. That will take some time to be developed. We don't know exactly when. Yeah, it's even in our case where we're drilling close to surface, we've drilled a lot of holes. You don't hit in every hole. You hit a package, sometimes lithium, sometimes cesium, sometimes nothing. In our case, the question is, will it hold together? So it's not an easy metal to explore for and find. In our case, it was a bit of a process, and we were reluctant to just charge into the metal because, there's some element of people saying, well, it's just the flavor of the day, and oh yeah, cesium's hot, so grid's now in cesium. We do not believe that's the case at all, just because, since we announced, our intention to really proceed with cesium, there has been really no new commercial discoveries or, drill hole discoveries of cesium around the world. That's how rare it is, even though many companies are looking, many companies have pegmatites with lithium, small amounts of cesium, but nothing economic. So until you have a number of drill holes that hit pollucite that hold together, I think it's just a concept. And in our case, we've hit on a large number of holes. So, the one thing I'd say is that we hope in the area, like there's very, very underexplored. We know there's other pegmatites in the area. Once we finish with this resource, we want to, expand our search and see, what is the potential for more of these. So yeah, one step at a time for us. But yeah, it's been a process. It's a discovery process, I'd say. Yeah.
Hey, Robin, I got a question for you that I'd like to interrupt Jack, because I think it will be important to the viewers. Talk a little bit about grade, and because you mentioned how cesium deposits, how few they've been developed. I think it's super important for the viewers to understand kind of how special this spot is and what grades mean in the cesium world.
Yeah, so it's you're looking for the cesium in the mineral pollucite, and I'm not a geologist, but roughly speaking, you can get roughly, I think, up to 42% cesium in pure pollucite. I think roughly that's the number. So when you hit pollucite, and the reason that people want to find pollucite is most easily processed because it's so high grade. So when you find pollucite, that's really what you're looking for in the cesium world. And so in our case, we're finding pollucite. It's we confirmed by mineralogical studies that it is pollucite, and we can tell by the grade. So when we hit an interval of pollucite, we'll get grades that I think the highest grade we hit so far is 27%. And so that type of grade, depending on the price per percent, it's very valuable material, I'll say that. And it's like multi-ounce gold, really. And so that in an environment where we are, that's near surface, that most likely will be open pit extraction, makes it extremely valuable commodity to find. So a small number of tons can translate into a lot of revenue.
This is unusual in that this is a primary cesium mine. The viewers don't recognize that there are very few primary mineral mines. Most things are mixtures or they're byproducts or co-products. This is in a way almost unique. That's a horrible English construction.
It is unique. And maybe I might just ask Brandon to kind of, there's another aspect is you're looking at high grade material, but in terms of the a prospective junior miner like Grid looking at the material to go from the rock in the ground to a saleable product, and the amount of money that you need to put up to make that happen, that's almost as unique as the potential value of the material. So Brandon, can you explain that?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe before I do that, just on the market, Jack, in terms of, there's two other juniors that are solely focused on cesium who have actual resources. There's PMET, which Robin mentioned, and there's Power Metals. And, from the lithium boom of, 3, 4 years ago, when you assay for lithium, you assay for cesium. So when Power Metals came out a few years ago and started focusing on cesium, there was concern from our geologists and others that there could be a lot of these things coming out, but nothing else came out except for us and PMED. So this stuff is geologically very rare. The grades we're hitting, 3 meters of 20%. Those are, similar, if not better than intercepts from our competitors as well. It's that's what you're looking for. There are other companies that have a meter at 1%, but nothing holds together. So it is geologically extremely rare. And then the other crazy thing about cesium is that in pollucite, that if you actually find it, which is very hard, but we have, to process it into a concentrate, all you do is you crush the rock and you ore sort. So you don't actually need tailings, expensive fixed infrastructure. You can bring in a mobile crusher, a mobile ore sorter, and there's your concentrate. And normally you're targeting a concentrate grade of 10 to 20%. And so obviously we have holes that are concentrate grade that we've reported over the past 2 or 3 months. So, it's a great situation from an initial CapEx perspective. And Power Metals has actually mentioned they think their initial CapEx will be 8 million Canadian. So, it's in the realm of mining. Those are numbers people don't really, it's hard to believe them, but it's effectively more a quarry than a true mining operation with a big mill and tailings. And that's how you can get these very low CapEx numbers and get to a saleable concentrate that is very high value.
What is your plan to add value? At what point are you going to sell product into the market? What will be the form?
Well, we certainly will want to take it to a concentrate,
Mhm.
Crush and ore sort the material to create a concentrate. Past that, the next stage in the value chain is to take that to some kind of, chemical.
Mhm.
And where I'd say we're evaluating ways to capture some of that margin from the chain. So we don't know right now, but we're certainly looking at the alternatives.
This is actually, it's interesting to me because most people in a junior company at your stage are talking hundreds of millions of dollars to build adits and to clear the land and build a road and bring in power. And none of that seems to be a problem for you. You have a situation where, quite frankly, you're going to be one of the very low cost producers. And this to me is a real winner. It's hard for me to, contemplate how few cesium deposits there are in the world. Okay.
Yep.
They all seem to be near my ancestral hometown of Winnipeg. Okay. For some reason.
That's right. I mean, our timing, I think, is not by our doing, but I think it's just, right now the dynamics look very, very good.
Right.
The supply to demand fundamentals, and we will be, when we start the permitting process, we will be trying to permit a mine. So that's never, an easy thing. But not having, in particular, tailings, we're not using water in the process to make a concentrate. We won't be moving a lot of rock. So those, I think, are two of the main factors, particularly tailings, where you're leaving the residue from your mining process on site for, in effect forever. And people are justifiably, concerned about, what, the problems from mining have been materials leaching into the, water table. In our case, we won't have tailings. And as such, it is, much more like, really, it's like a quarry where you're, taking rock out and selling it. In this case, we'd be crushing it and then sorting it and leaving some of the rock behind. but the rock does not have sulfides in it, which can create acid rock drainage, and it's really more like quartz than anything else. So it's very inert. Cesium is actually used in drilling fluids because of it's environmentally benign. So that's one of its properties. So it's a very unique situation in terms of trying to permit a mine for something like this, and we want to be very respectful of the process, but I think some of the main hurdles that projects have in terms of the environmental aspect, the process, and then of course the capital cost for mines now can easily range into the billions of dollars, whereas ours is going to be, just very, very low in the realm of mining projects.
What's your target date for some first production?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have an exact target date, but I'll give some general parameters. I think we can say now from the drilling that we see this drilling as holding together. We think we wouldn't want to start a mineral resource estimate unless we thought we would have a favorable result. So, we haven't announced that yet, but that's something, obviously it's a main, goal to launch that and relatively soon. And then, once we have a general sense, okay, here's going to be the resource, we've already started thinking, well, how would we extract this? And we're looking at something that's, most of the drilling we've done, has been in the area of a football field. So, we would look at that would kind of be the footprint of, what we would initially want to extract. And then, we would take the ore, at that point, ore out, crush it, ore sort it, create a concentrate. That will really be the project. So, we think would make sense to launch the permitting, process, sooner than later, within, the next, few months,
Okay.
something like that. And, in Manitoba, one of the key considerations, along with the local communities, are the First Nation communities, and engaging with them and letting them know what the plans are and how they could participate and what the benefits are. And we've already started that kind of outreach. So we're trying to make sure that we're not surprising anybody by what we're doing. We're socializing the idea, trying to explain the benefits and how this could turn into a larger and longer term project. So I think that if we get that process going, I'll say by this time next year we would like to have a lot of clarity on when we might be able to start really seriously looking at the end stages of a project like this. So I'm a bit reluctant to give you a date, but
okay.
We think in the realm of mining projects, it's going to be at the very, very short end of a development process.
So I have just one request for you. Okay. I have to assume you'll be coming to the Critical Minerals Institute symposium in Toronto in mid-May.
Yes.
Okay. Can you do me a favor, please, and bring some pollucite? I've never seen any, nor has anyone else at the conference.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see something where Canada's the world leader.
Yeah,
that's going to be,
and it's a new discovery. This is I can say that it's definitely a legitimate new discovery of pollucite, and we see the interest from people in the industry and what we're doing. And having said that, Jack, I just want to let you know that for all its glamour as used in all these high-tech applications and strategic applications, it is not really a very exciting mineral to look at. Like you see emeralds and rubies and things, but it's kind of a bit ho-hum, but it is unique in itself.
I have news for you. millions of people more have seen emeralds and rubies than have ever seen cesium.
That's
Okay,
right.
so that and I would like to see some pollucite. So
Yeah, I know. By all means, we'll
I'm
polish it up.
gonna be looking for you in
Yeah,
Toronto.
okay, for sure. Well, we can do that.
Anyway, thank you very much for the update, and we're gonna follow this one closely.
Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.